Welcome back to NutraPreneur. Today we are delighted to have Elan Sudberg, the CEO of Alkemist Labs, a pioneering force in botanical identity testing and phytochemical potency analysis. Welcome. It's so great to have you today.
Thank you, Bethany. Pleasure to be here.
So I think first it'd be great for you to tell us about what experiences led you to pioneer botanical identity testing at Alkemist Labs.
It's a family-run business, owned and operated by myself and my father, who is a retired chiropractor, acupuncturist, and had a line of herbal supplements. So I basically was born into this industry. He made liquid tinctures in our garage. Don't tell the FDA. That's all history at this point. And so we actually did some quality control for incoming raw ingredients for his tinctures, failed some things, and the vendors who sold us those things asked us for those reports to prove we were wrong, that the material was correct. We gave them the results, and they were kind of astonished by the quality of just the simple internal report and the fact that we showed them everything. And then they asked us to test another batch, and we did, and then another batch, and we sort of realized we were becoming a testing laboratory, and basically just sort of accidentally fell into the testing side of this industry, and then closed up shop for the tincture business, and that was about 27 years ago.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think, as the supplement industry and just the use of botanicals is just growing rapidly. And I think understanding testing and, seeing transparency and education is really important right now. And so
Right.
how does full method transparency and the personalized technical support that you provide benefit your clients?
When we started the lab, I was just exiting high school and was kind of forced into getting a major, chemistry major, which was not my favorite subject in high school. And I remember in chemistry class, you would go to the lab and you prepare a lab notebook in advance, and you have to show the lab professor the lab notebook with all of your calculations already done and ready to go, full transparency. What a concept! And so that's how I was trained as a chemist. And then when we started to produce reports to industry, I didn't see it in any other way. The thought of proprietary didn't make sense. When you're in college, if there's no proprietary, it's full method disclosure. And then somehow in industry, you can say proprietary and all this secret sauce. But then when you go to court, it's all going to come out. So we actually just kind of pioneered transparency because that's how the only thing we really know, or we only knew at the time. And oddly enough, we got a lot of feedback from the various other labs existing that, hey, you're going to put yourself out of business. Companies are going to take your methods and they're never going to come back. And so here we are nearly 30 years later. And that has happened. Companies have come to us, tested it for a couple of years, and then internalized the methods. But they still come back as needed. And then this to me also plays into the consumers. There's a desire to know what's in these products, and not just to accept what's on the label, is to see more, even if they don't fully understand it. They want access to the data. And I think that access, again, even if they don't get what a HPTLC chromatogram is or an HPLC chromatogram is, gives them the confidence that nothing is funny, no funny business is happening with that brand. And the companies that aren't willing to share, I think it's very telling. And so it's just kind of happened by accident again. But I consider myself a marketing guy with a chemistry degree. And so I think, I've always appreciated the CSI type of aspect of knowing, and we bring that to the dietary supplement industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point. Consumers do want to be more educated. And, I think people are aware of, some of the more like safety type testing that takes place, like micro testing and,
Yeah.
the vitamins that are tested, but not a lot of people understand the botanical testing. And so, with botanical testing specifically, how does Alchemist Labs assist companies in maintaining quality and CGMP compliance?
Yeah, so the first step in CGMP compliance is identity testing. It makes no sense to do pesticides, heavy metals, residuals, or microbes if you don't even know if you have the right material. And so back to when we first started, funny story is I cashed in bar mitzvah money to buy our first pieces of equipment. My father cashed in 401ks for our first pieces of equipment. So we started off low tech because that's what we had the ability to afford. The technology we use and deployed back then is, over 100 years old. It's HPTLC, it's botanical microscopy that goes back hundreds of years. And that was a function of, having an appreciation for the nuanced approach of those techniques, but also because that's what we could afford. We couldn't afford HPLCs galore. And now we have whole bays of them, of course. But There just so happened to be not a lot of companies focusing on identity testing. Everyone was using the fanciest, coolest, sexiest new equipment. And so we were that little lab just sort of happened to focus on identity testing, which ended up being very, very important when 10 years later, after our start date in 2007, the GMPs came out. And they made it very clear that identity testing is absolutely required and critically important. And the industry had very little choices where to go. And we had, like I said, at that point, been 10 years in collecting reference materials, housing them in on-site herbarium, which is basically a room full of control samples of plants. And it really made us very quickly the authority on botanical identity testing. And of course, since then, we've moved over to potency and contamination as well to pioneer that, and all in the botanical and fungal space, which is where we started and what we love to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, of course, it's important for the finished products and the brands to have the confidence that their finished products are testing out and showing what they want it to. But I think it's also a great resource for manufacturers so they can submit their raw materials to your lab to be
Right.
tested and hold their vendors accountable. Kind of like you said, you were
Yeah.
receiving things from suppliers and testing it and being like, hey, this isn't what we thought we ordered.
Right.
So I think that's really important in this industry as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I think unfortunately this industry has been plagued since really the dawn of allopathic medicine, which for which
Mhm.
I'm grateful exists. Don't get me wrong, I'm not anti really anything. It's available for us when you need it. But since the dawn of allopathic medicine, our industry has been sidelined as witchcraft and snake oil. And then most recently, and even around the pandemic, disinformation that we are unregulated, untested, and unsafe, and which is also false, false, and false. I mean, we're highly regulated, and efficacy is to be anecdotally debated, of course. Safe. I mean, we have the best safety record of all FDA regulated product categories. More people have died from pharmaceutical drugs in our conversation time here than probably the history of our, most recent 100 or 200 years of this industry. So I feel like there's this huge opportunity to market quality. So you mentioned the manufacturers, the ingredient suppliers. We're doing an absolute terrible job in falsifying that narrative by showing the quality that we do have in our supply chain. So, that's something that I've been really working hard as even as a laboratory. I'm not selling products. I'm trying to urge my customers to share the reports to one up their competitors who aren't willing to or can't because they have poor quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'd say you're a champion of next generation transparency. And so, what initiatives has Alchemist Labs implemented?
Yeah, so from the very beginning, we knew no other way than to show all the data for our reports. And then later on, I want to say about 10 or 12 years into my career, I realized that the consumers aren't getting access to this data. So we have customers spend hundreds of thousands a year with us, millions a year in totality with all their labs, and they put that product, the C of A's, in a drawer. It's never to be seen again. It's just basically, a sore point on a balance sheet for a CFO or on a P&L. And I think that is marketing gold. And so we've pioneered this concept of next generation transparency, which is basically just giving the access to the raw data to the consumers. We've then taken the raw data, I call them the nerd versions of the reports, the ones that the FDA would look at or internal documents, and we've made consumer-centric versions. So basically, think Reader's Digest made a certificate of analysis so that basically anyone can read it and understand. And then most recently, a few years back, we pioneered something we called Alkemist Assured, which is a certification program. It's basically a surveillance program. It's a logo that goes in a bottle. It can't be purchased. It's a adherence to a surveillance program that's specific to the brand, the batch, cadence, the complexity of the ingredients, and that is supposed to go all the way to the consumers. And you can find it in some stores on the shelves for some products now. But oddly enough, it's been making more headway in the internal ingredient side of things, as well as contract manufacturers. So brands are now selling raw ingredients, powdered botanicals or extracts or liquids, or whatever it might be, with an Alchemist Assured logo on it all the way through the supply chain. Contract manufacturers are now testing the material because they make things for 3 or 4 different brands. They just label differently, and so now there's ingredient suppliers with Alchemist Assured, there's contract manufacturers with Alchemist Assured, and now there's finished products on the store shelves with an Alchemist Assured logo. And behind that is, of course, transparency, consumer-centric CVAs, and we implore our customers to have batch-to-batch lookup tables for So folks can look at a bottle, see the lot number, go online and find the actual results. Again, they don't have to understand it, but the fact that it's available gives them confidence to buy your product over another brand who's not willing to share the data. Because again, why wouldn't you share the data?
This episode is brought to you by NutraPayments.com. If your business needs credit card processing that fully integrates with most major Nutra software platforms, offers the lowest industry prices, and has built-in features like recurring billing, $0 trials, and chargeback prevention, then visit us at NutraPayments.com for a free online quote. Could you highlight for us any contributions or collaborations with industry associations that really promote education and research and advocacy?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm a marketing guy with a chemistry degree, and participation in trade shows or trade associations is absolutely primary marketing for us. It's one, we absolutely care about the industry more than any other lab, as far as my experience goes. But participating at the table, that's saying you're either at the table, or you're being eaten for dinner. So I'd rather, even though I'm not selling a product, I participate at the table as though I am. So we are very actively involved with APA, American Herbal Products Association, which is a whole bunch of different committees, offers industry guidance and education. I'm on the board and the executive board. Very active with the American Botanical Council, and they have their BAP program, which is a really wonderful program. Just really opening the conversation about adulteration in the industry, specific to particular botanicals and lab guidances and whatnot. UNPA, United Natural Products Association, active there with their various committees and their executive committee, and then CRN, Council for Responsible Nutrition, active there, and then NPA, Natural Products Association, and then lastly the NASC, Natural Animal Supplement Council. So for over on the pet side, I've just rattled off basically all of the associations that we are active with, that all offer their own versions of education and industry guidance, so that we can kind of navigate these tricky scenarios in our industry and ultimately make a product that works. And while they can't say helps prevent, treat, or cure illnesses, but we all know that's kind of why we're here. We just don't say it legally. But labs are in the background making sure that that's possible with high quality ingredients, no contaminations, and ultimately that also leads to return sales, which helps us all keep in business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great, to be involved with all of those committees and resources out there and to be able to network and meet with people, because this industry is constantly evolving. So
Yes,
it's good to have lots of connections for sure.
absolutely. Absolutely. Very critical.
Yes. And so how does Alkemist Labs balance providing reliable test results while also contributing to broader industry initiatives?
We don't sleep. I sleep very little. I just don't need a lot of sleep. And so I burn the candle from, late night to early morning. So it takes a lot, to be that active in all the trade associations that I've just mentioned. Also, I do a lot of writing, and I contribute on LinkedIn pretty loudly. I speak truth to power. The other labs are either small and quiet or monstrous. And so we consider ourselves the biggest little lab, but we're approaching the littlest big lab soon. And we have this voice of care and compassion for the industry for which we serve and for which we feed off of. Really, it's where we eat. And so I want to support it as much as possible.
Yeah. And I think, there are those labs that everyone kind of knows of in the industry. And, not a lot of people know about the smaller labs. Or if you do
Yeah,
use a smaller lab, they
right.
might be outsourcing botanical
Yeah,
testing. So it'd be great for
exactly.
our listeners to know there's a lab they can just go straight to
Right.
for all of their botanical needs. So that's great.
Yeah, we're with I think the only lab in the industry and perhaps the world that has an ISO 17025 accreditation with a flexible scope for all botanicals
Mhm.
for identity with HPLC and microscopy. So generally an ISO accreditation would be for a particular scope, which is generally, milk fat or pH and whatever, or some particular method. Ours is this broad, flexible scope for all plants on Earth and all mushrooms on Earth, which is pretty great. And that's really important. There's a lot of labs out there. Actually, there's not too many. There's only a handful of big ones who specialize in all the things: tilapia, leather dye, aerospace, oil and gas, chamomile. And then there's other labs like ourselves that are tiny and we really boutique. We focus on botanicals and fungus. And we are going to expand into other platforms in the new year and so on. So we have to because our customers are basically begging us to. They're tired of using the monstrous labs. And there's a few others that are great in our industry. And there's a couple that have really tarnished the reputation of the industry by doing poor quality testing, being less than transparent, and actually straight up fraud. Some have been noted on the FDA, and that's one of the tips I always give folks is you can search the FDA's website for 43s and warning letters, and there are labs in our industry still existing that have them. And that old logical fallacy that ignorance is bliss. The GMPs came out over 10 years ago. They didn't say specifically what to do. They just said use science. Best of luck, and we'll see you in court. And so, you can use a lot of different testing technologies. Not all are good. Not all are fit for purpose. And if you just kind of throw a test at it and get a result and you move it along, and that's all you care about, you can basically be putting poor quality material into the industry. At worst, case people could die. Least bad is that it won't be a good quality material, won't work, you won't get return sales. I would also like to add that there's a lot of labs internally. So a lot of folks are business X, contract manufacturer, but they have a little lab in the corner doing bare minimum, plug and play plunger type testing. And I think those are probably the worst part of our industry. Those are the ones that they're not labs for the industry. They're internal labs, and no one knows who they are and what they're up to, except for that is internal auditing they do on themselves, which is kind of incestuous. So my tip is really to audit, question, and don't accept anyone's science, challenge the science, and never stop challenging the science.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that you will kind of be broadening your scope for the new year. So, what is your
Yeah.
vision for the future of botanical science and quality at Alkemist Labs?
Yeah, we've been sort of pigeonholed as the identity lab for a long time, and that's been actually false. We've been doing potency testing for quite a bit, and most recently, in the last 2 years, we added contaminants. So now we can do is it or is it not? How good is it from the stance of how much caffeine or echinocosides are in there, but also contaminant testing, metals, pesticides, residuals, and microbiology. Those last ones I mentioned will all be on our ISO scope in the new year, and we'll launch those fully. The customers are still coming to us because we don't touch vitamins, we don't touch probiotics, we don't touch the sports supplement area, and they're not joking, begging us to take on those various platforms. We're a small company, we're about 50 people, and we have to be very careful about where we go, in which direction, and who we compete with. There are other labs that, as I mentioned, our entire revenue is an error on their balance sheet, and they round it up. We're basically minuscule to their P&L and their balance sheet. So we have to be careful who we jump into competition with. But when we moved from identity to potency, it was 100% because clients were begging us. They were like, we need you to quantify the phytochemicals in our plants because we send it to you for identity and other labs for that. And it's just a nightmare. And our customer service, our turnaround time, our quality, our value propositions, price is really low on the list of concerns, because running an ISO 17025 is very expensive. There's a lot of quality hoops that take a lot of time and extra money and personnel. And so we charge more as a result, but you get the high quality, you get the turnaround time, you get that customer support that you don't get with all the other labs.
Yeah. And I think, you just don't want to overwhelm your team or
Yeah.
affect lead times and,
Yeah,
take away that kind of personalized aspect that you have, because
exactly.
it sounds like you have a really good relationship with all of your clients.
Yeah. And employees, if you go to glassdoor.com as an example, you look at our results or our reviews, there's only, I think, one really nasty one, and you can see the response I've given, and it's pretty clear what was going on. But for the most part, our employees love working here. We have a really great culture. Work-life balance is very critical to me. I have 2 young children and a wife that I love very, very much, and I can't wait to be with them. And so I want my staff to have partners who love their job. It's great if your employees love their job, but if they're dogs, cats, wives, husbands, boyfriends, girlfriends, all them love the company that they work for. You have happy employees. And so that's critical as much as it is critical to have a good rapport with customers in the industry. And, if you know me, if you've met me once, we hug, my kids, my wife, perhaps you've even been to my home. And that's kind of the culture that I provide in this industry.
Yeah, that's great. And do you have any advice for companies that are navigating the evolving landscape of botanical testing and quality assurance?
I say challenge everything, nonstop. The pandemic all taught us Fear is a very extraordinary marketing tool, and trust is not to be given uh, lightly. And so, there's that old saying is trust but verify. I think verify but trust, and then trust. Verify twice. Audit your supply chain, audit your labs. Don't accept methods without transparency. Don't accept we've always done it that way. And you might be a burden to those vendors and those partners, but if they make you feel like a burden for asking normal baseline questions, you find another vendor and run. Find a better lab, find a better contract manufacturer. There should be retains for all samples for years and years and years. Labs should have no problem telling you how they arrived to the results. If it says method X and X is AOAC something, but it says modified, ask how it was modified. You need to know these questions because the FDA is going to come to your facility in 6 months and ask you the same question. And you're going to feel really stupid when you can't answer it and you have no transparency behind that data, which ultimately speaks to the quality and safety of your final product, which goes in the stomachs of humans all over the planet. And if you have to think that way, that, how are we not poisoning people? How are we making this actually a great product? And you have to back that up with all the data that I just mentioned. So challenge, challenge, challenge.
Yes, great advice. And can you share any upcoming projects or innovations at Alkemist Labs that
Yeah.
exemplify your commitment to advancing the science and quality of botanicals?
Yeah, so there's this other industry sort of doesn't fit in ours because we're in the food sector, dietary supplements, but there's the psychedelic plants and fungus sector on planet Earth now that is sort of there's a psychedelic renaissance or a shroom boom, as you probably heard it. And so there's this really interesting opportunity to impact mental health like never before. And cannabis showed up and it was medical and recreational. It's been kind of a mess, and I'm happy we didn't really jump into there too much. We do a lot of hemp testing for local authorities only, but not recreational for anyone because it's still federally legal. But there is more research being done on psychedelic plants and mushrooms by established research leaders, universities and whatnot than ever before. Way more than cannabis ever received, and the professional organizations that are taking interest in that category is really impressive. And so we actually have a DEA registration to federally legally test all of those substances, plants and fungi, and it will be on our ISO scope in the new year as well. So that's an advancement, sort of not in the industry, but in an ancillary industry. And then, Alchemist Assured is really picking up traction. The industry has no other cert program for plants and mushrooms. There are certification bodies and cert programs, but they don't really focus on anything but simple vitamins and some fish oils, things like that. So it's the only one of its kind, and it's taking a lot of traction, and it's an invite-only program. So people can't just come and say, "I want that." You have to work with us, and you have to earn the ability to do this testing right. And then we come to you and actually say, "Hey, you already qualify. We already test your products top to bottom. All you have to do is, we figure out a cadence to some random testing, and then we work together, and you can put an Alchemist Assured on your packaging." And that's going to be really big in the next year as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a really neat program, and I'm sure a lot of brands you work with will want to utilize
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. They're lining up.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much once again for joining us.
My
And
pleasure.
as we conclude this enlightening conversation, we extend our gratitude to Elan for sharing his experiences and insights into the pioneering work of Alchemist Labs. For more information on their testing services and contributions to industry initiatives, we encourage you to explore the provided links. Stay tuned for more thought-provoking discussions on NutraPreneur, and don't forget to engage with us on social media. Until next time, stay informed and inspired in the realm of nutraceutical innovations.